Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Let's just take a quick look at the other items on the international scene before we get back to labor and economics. There's a big confab of finance oligarchs at the Lago di Como. I think this is the Bellagio estate of the Rockefeller Foundation. Trichet will be there today, tomorrow. That will be interesting. That's sort of these sort of magic mountain conferences, right, where they sort of dance on the volcano as everything's collapsing. They go to a scene of extreme refinement and wealth and talk about their plans. U.S. drones are massively attacking in Yemen, in South Yemen in particular. They're killing about 30 people a day, as far as I can see. 20% of all the CIA personnel are now targeters. They're now picking people to assassinate outside of law, with impunity, they think, on the other side of the world. Iran is concerned about an attack, as well they might be. If those NATO assets can move to the eastern Mediterranean, they'll be used against Syria, which means Hezbollah, which means Iran. The Iranians are moving their centrifuges more into the underground sites to make them as impervious as possible to U.S. or Israeli attack. Turkey. Here, the Turks may have thought better. The question was, will Turkey become a kamikaze puppet of NATO, the U.S., and the British by attacking Syria? So far, not. No kamikaze puppet so far. And rather, what I seem to see is the Turkish government, Davutoglu and Erdogan, are trying to get off the hook with Syria by picking a big fight with the Israelis, which is, of course, easy to do. There's a UN report now about that Gaza aid flotilla last year, and the UN report says Israel used excessive and unreasonable force in busting up the Gaza flotilla. They killed 16 people. I think most of them were Turks. So the Israelis reject it. They will never apologize, of course, and the Turks are demanding an apology. And there's some talk now of at least a break of diplomatic relations between Israel and Turkey. This is much smarter than invading Syria. This is a low cost and effective and on the whole quite appropriate thing for the Turks to do. This is smart politics, certainly compared to attacking Syria. I see again in Syria very little today about Friday prayers, very little. It seems to me that the Syrian army has broken the back of the Muslim Brotherhood once again, and what they're trying to push forward are these small defections by agents in place that they're pulling their strings and getting them to come out and defect. Finally, in the background of all this, the China ultimatum. This came up in a conference call last Sunday night. China had issued an ultimatum to the United States, back off on Pakistan. We will regard an attack on Pakistan as an attack on China. Lo and behold, that seems to have worked. We seem to have gotten through a couple of months now of the summer, prime military campaigning time and bombing time. The ultimatum by China to the United States seems to have had some effect. Now, that doesn't mean that the effect will last, but for the moment, as you can see, typical of any bully, where there is resistance, the bully will back off and try to go someplace where he can bully without resistance and without retaliation. But watch Rabia Kadir. Watch for Rabia Kadir out there in Northern Virginia. She was probably the next-door neighbor of Hifter, who's now killing people in Libya. Rabia Kadir of the World Uyghur Conference. Watch what she can do in the time coming up. Now, we got to shift into economics with an eye towards Labor Day and the world economy. I would say right now we are headed into a clear European banking crisis, a banking panic in September, October, perhaps into early November. But I think this is now pretty much in the cards. This is coming. It's not just me. Remember Lagarde, the new U.S. puppet head of the International Monetary Fund, the woman who would not allow French to be used in her ministry, but only English. This Christine Lagarde, now the new IMF, the beneficiary of that fake frame-up against Strauss-Kahn. Whatever you think of Strauss-Kahn, it was a frame-up by the CIA. Remember, Strauss-Kahn was on his way to Merkel. and then somebody was on his way to Gaddafi to set up some kind of a seed crystal of an alternative world monetary system. So this had to be stopped, and Dominique Strauss-Kahn's treatment was the way to stop it. Lagarde says the European situation is grave, and it's clear that this focuses on the European banks. Therefore, I believe we must reckon now with a new systemic crisis. In other words, a new world banking panic, similar to the world derivatives panic of September 2008. And, of course, that had to build up over a period of about a year. Remember, from the bankruptcy of Countrywide Bank with panic runs, the bankruptcy of Northern Rock with panic runs, the bankruptcy of Bear Stearns in the spring, March of 2008, all of that building up then to that Lehman Brothers week where AIG, Wells, Merrill Lynch, and really all the institutions in Wall Street were essentially blasted into bankruptcy by their derivatives, by their collateralized debt obligations and their credit default swaps. Collateralized debt obligations in the case of just about all of them, credit default swaps in the case of AIG, but that was a very big one. So we're now headed towards this, another disintegration, another breakdown crisis of the system, despite the bailouts. Now, what this, of course, means is these zombie banks have reached the point where they can't be kept with the appearance of solvency, even with government bailouts. The black hole of derivatives consumes the monetary wealth of the world, and the only thing to do is to get out the special disintegrator gun and do away with the zombie banks and send their black holes into some other part of the universe. Let them attack some other galaxy. Let's take a look at what has happened today. The big news this morning here in the U.S. was that we've had no job growth, 0 jobs created in August, unemployment at 9.1, and as I said earlier in the week, we'd heard the 9.1 will remain. Now, 9.1 really means 22, 23%. It's approaching 25% unemployment, depression levels. And instead, we've got a president so weak and so feckless that he allows reactionary Republicans to rant and rave about spending and the budget as if this were fundamental. There was no budget crisis. You want to see a budget crisis? Look at Greece. This morning, Greece is paying 50%, 50%, on a 2-year note. You want to sell a Greek government 2-year treasury note, you've got to pay 50% interest. That's a crisis. When you can't borrow is a crisis. The U.S. 10-year, by contrast, the interest rates are down there about, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3% for a 10-year. This is not a crisis. There never was a crisis. If the Republicans had been listening to the markets, they never would have raised this demagogy about a crisis because there never was one in that sense. Complete Republican fascistoid demagogy tearing down the United States, all this talk, the United States is bankrupt, 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 we don't have any money left. This is enemy propaganda. This is subversion. This is treason on the economic front, and they know what they're doing. They're oligarchs, and they want to smash the state. Certainly. That's what oligarchs always do. Neo-feudalists, if you like. So now we've had a 2-week truce in the New York stock market since about the time of Jackson Hole, since Bernanke punted while hinting that there might be a QE3, quantitative easing, in the wings. But that has now ended. The stock market was down 250 points this morning on this unemployment bad news, and it's now down about 200 points. But in the middle of this, we have to focus on the European banks. Let's take a look at some of them now, because here we're looking for the next Lehman Brothers, and there are lots and lots of candidates on both sides of the Atlantic. Barclays Bank has now moved to the fore. Barclays Bank down 8%. They're the big tragedy of the day. It's not Commerzbank or Société Générale or Unicredito, but Barclays down 8%, and we'll be back in a minute.